Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're diving deep into a world that existed long before civilization, long before cities, before agriculture, before we even learned to control fire consistently. We're traveling back 5.8 million years to witness something extraordinary. How did our earliest ancestors not just survive, but actually thrive in a landscape that would kill most of us within hours? Before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button if you find this fascinating, and maybe drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing our global community come together over these incredible stories from our past. Now settle in, maybe dim those lights, and let's journey back to a time when survival meant becoming one with nature itself. Picture this. You've just been transported back 5.8 million years to what we now call East Africa. The sun is setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and deep purples. But this isn't the peaceful evening you might imagine. The temperature is dropping fast, and you can hear the distant roar of predators stirring as darkness approaches. Your stomach churns with hunger, your throat burns with thirst, and you have absolutely nothing. No tools, no shelter, no fire, no synthetic materials. Just your bare hands, and a brain that's about to be tested in ways you never imagined. This was reality for our earliest human ancestors. Not the romanticized caveman life you see in movies, but a daily battle against elements so harsh they would break most modern humans before sunrise. Yet somehow, these incredible beings didn't just endure this world, they mastered it. The landscape around you is nothing like the Africa you might know today. This is the Pliocene epoch, a time when massive climate shifts were reshaping entire continents. The forests that once covered much of East Africa were retreating, giving way to expanding savannas dotted with isolated woodland patches. Rivers changed course without warning. Volcanic activity was constant, filling the air with ash and creating new geographical features overnight. But here's what's truly remarkable. While this environmental chaos was driving countless species to extinction, our ancestors were using it as an opportunity. They were developing something that would separate them from every other creature on Earth. The ability to read nature's patterns and transform the environment itself into their shelter, their protection, their home. The individuals we're following tonight weren't modern humans. They weren't even early Homo sapiens. These were beings like Australopithecus afarensis, walking upright but still carrying many ape-like characteristics. Their brains were roughly 1/3 the size of ours today. They had no language as we understand it, no complex tools, no domesticated animals. What they had was something far more valuable, an intimate understanding of their environment that bordered on the supernatural. Watch as a small group makes their way across the savannah as twilight deepens. The matriarch, an older female with scars marking decades of survival, suddenly stops. Her head tilts slightly, reading signals invisible to us. She's processing the direction of the wind, the calls of distant birds, the subtle changes in humidity that suggest weather patterns hours away. Her companions gather around her, their eyes scanning the horizon not for landmarks we might recognize, but for the subtle environmental cues that spell the difference between life and death. They're searching for tonight's shelter, and their criteria are far more complex than simply finding a cave or tree. They need protection from predators, but also from the elements. They need access to water, but not too close to rivers where larger predators hunt. They need escape routes, wind barriers, and materials for construction. Most importantly, they need to read the landscape's mood, understanding which areas will remain safe through the night and which might become death traps. As they move, notice how differently they interact with their environment compared to any modern human. Every plant, every rock formation, every change in soil texture tells them a story. That cluster of acacia trees doesn't just provide shade. The distribution of the trees reveals underground water sources, The way the grass grows around their base indicates soil stability. The presence of certain insects suggests which trees are healthy enough to provide reliable shelter materials. The matriarch leads them toward what appears to be an unremarkable rocky outcrop. But her experienced eyes see something extraordinary. This isn't just a pile of stones. It's a natural architecture waiting to be completed. The way the rocks have fallen creates a partial windbreak facing the prevailing winds. There's a small depression that will collect and channel rainwater away from their sleeping area. Most crucially, the positioning offers multiple escape routes while providing clear sightlines across the surrounding terrain. But finding the location is only the beginning. Now comes the real mastery. These early humans are about to demonstrate construction techniques that modern survival experts struggle to replicate. They're going to transform this natural formation into a sophisticated shelter system using nothing but materials the landscape provides, and knowledge passed down through countless generations. The work begins immediately. While some members of the group scout the perimeter for dangers, others start the intricate process of reading the available materials. That fallen log isn't just wood. Its species, age, and condition determine exactly how it can be used. The way it's weathered tells them about its structural integrity. The insects living in it reveal whether it's still sound or beginning to rot from the inside. They approach a stand of tall grasses, but they don't simply grab handfuls. Their hands move with surgical precision, selecting only stems of specific thickness and flexibility. They test each piece by bending it slightly, listening to the subtle sounds that indicate whether it will hold under stress or snap at a crucial moment. Some grasses are too young and will shrink as they dry. Others are too old and have lost their flexibility. They're looking for that perfect middle ground, materials in their prime. Watch as they begin weaving these grasses together. Their fingers move with a speed and certainty that comes from lifetimes of practice. But this isn't random weaving. They're creating specific patterns, each designed for a particular function. Some sections are woven tightly to shed water. Others are kept loose to allow air circulation while still blocking wind. They're engineering different zones within their shelter, each optimized for its specific purpose. The rocky outcrop provides the foundation, but they're not content to simply hide behind it. They begin constructing what can only be described as an extension of the natural formation. Using longer branches wedged into cracks in the stone, they create a framework that follows the contours of the rock while extending the protected area. This isn't crude lean-to construction. They're building multiple levels, creating sleeping areas elevated off the ground, storage spaces for gathered food, and even designated areas for different group activities. As they work, the temperature continues to drop. What started as a warm evening is becoming a genuinely cold night, with temperatures that would send most modern humans scrambling for heated shelters. But these early humans have anticipated this. They've been gathering specific types of vegetation throughout the construction process, materials chosen not just for their structural properties, but for their insulation value. Certain grasses, when properly prepared and layered, create remarkably effective insulation. But the preparation is key. They crush some plants to release oils that repel insects. Others are stripped of their outer layers to access the softer, more insulating inner fibers. They're creating a complex layered system where each material serves multiple purposes. The most ingenious aspect of their shelter construction is how they work with, rather than against, the natural airflow patterns around the rocky outcrop. By careful positioning of their barriers and openings, they've created a system where cool air is drawn in near ground level, while warm air from their bodies is trapped in the upper sleeping areas. It's passive climate control, engineered without instruments or formal education, based purely on intimate knowledge of how air moves through different spaces. But protection from the elements is only part of the challenge. This landscape is filled with predators that modern humans can barely imagine. Massive cats with teeth like daggers, pack-hunting hyenas larger and more aggressive than their modern descendants, ancient relatives of bears and wolves, all competing for the same resources these early humans need to survive. Our ancestors understood something crucial about predator behavior that goes far beyond simple hiding. They knew that most predators rely on predictable patterns when hunting. By creating shelters that break these patterns, that don't look or smell like typical prey refuges, they could dramatically reduce their vulnerability. Their construction techniques incorporated elements specifically designed to confuse potential threats. They used aromatic plants not just for their practical properties, but because certain scents mask human odors or even actively repel specific predators. The placement of their entrance and exit points wasn't random. They positioned them to take advantage of natural blind spots in the terrain, areas where approaching threats would be silhouetted against lighter backgrounds while the humans remained hidden in shadow. As full darkness settles over the landscape, their shelter is nearly complete. What started as a simple rocky outcrop has been transformed into something that would impress modern architects. Multiple levels connected by carefully constructed pathways, ventilation systems that maintain comfortable temperatures while preventing heat loss, storage areas that keep food dry and accessible, sleeping surfaces that provide comfort and warmth while remaining firm enough to allow quick movement if danger threatens. The final touches involve creating what can only be called early warning systems. Carefully placed dry branches that will crack loudly if disturbed by large animals. Arrangements of stones that will shift and rattle if something brushes against the shelter's perimeter. These aren't traps, but acoustic alarms that will wake the group if anything approaches during the night. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this entire construction process is how temporary it is. These early humans know that staying in one location too long increases their vulnerability. Their shelters are designed to be abandoned, to blend back into the landscape within days of their departure. They're not trying to permanently alter their environment. They're borrowing from it, using its resources briefly before returning them to the natural cycle. As the group settles in for the night, arranged in carefully planned positions that maximize both comfort and defensive capability, we begin to understand something profound about human adaptation. This isn't just survival. This is the beginning of architecture, of engineering, of the complex relationship between humans and their environment that would eventually reshape the entire planet. The sounds of the African night surround their shelter. Distant roars, the rustle of small creatures moving through grass, the whisper of wind through their carefully constructed walls. But inside, protected by nothing more than plant materials and stone arranged with perfect understanding of natural principles, our ancestors rest safely. They've taken nature's fury and transformed it into nature's embrace. Tomorrow they'll wake, dismantle what they've built, and move on to face new challenges. But tonight, 5.8 million years ago, in a shelter built entirely from the landscape itself, human ingenuity has won another victory against impossible odds. The morning light filtering through their ingeniously woven walls reveals something that would leave modern engineers speechless. What they've created isn't just functional, it's beautiful. The way the natural materials catch and filter the early sunlight creates patterns of light and shadow that seem almost artistic. But this beauty isn't accidental. These early humans understood something we've largely forgotten, that form and function don't just work together, they enhance each other. As the group begins to stir, watch how they interact with their temporary home. Every movement is efficient, purposeful. There's no wasted motion, no confusion about where things are stored or how systems work. Despite having no written instructions or blueprints, every member of the group knows exactly how this shelter functions. This knowledge isn't just practical, it's cultural. It's been passed down through generations, not through books or formal education, but through lived experience and careful observation. The dismantling process is just as remarkable as the construction. They don't simply tear everything apart and walk away. Each material is carefully evaluated. Some branches have been seasoned by the night air and are now better suited for future construction. Certain grasses have been compressed in ways that make them more useful as insulation. They're not just taking down a shelter, they're harvesting materials that have been improved by the building process itself. But here's where the story gets truly extraordinary. As they prepare to leave, the matriarch does something that challenges everything we thought we knew about early human intelligence. She begins to modify the natural rock formation they used as their foundation. Using nothing but stones and patient effort, she's changing the way water will flow around this outcrop during the next rainy season. She's creating small channels and basins that will collect and direct water in ways that benefit the vegetation growing here. This isn't random activity. She's ensuring that when they return to this area, possibly months or even years from now, the landscape will be more hospitable than they found it. She's practicing what we might call environmental engineering, but on a scale and with a subtlety that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. These early humans weren't just taking from their environment, they were giving back to it in ways that created positive feedback loops. As the group sets out across the morning landscape, they're not walking aimlessly. Their route is planned with the same precision that guided their shelter construction. They move in a formation that maximizes their ability to spot both opportunities and dangers. The lead scouts range ahead, reading the terrain for signs of water, food sources, and potential threats. The main group follows paths that offer the best combination of efficiency and safety. Notice how they communicate during this journey. With their limited vocal abilities, they rely heavily on gestures, body language, and what can only be described as environmental semaphore. A particular way of holding a branch indicates the presence of water ahead. A specific posture while walking warns of predator signs. They've developed an entire language based on their interaction with the natural world around them. The landscape they're traversing is revealing its secrets to them in ways that would be invisible to modern eyes. That patch of differently colored soil doesn't just indicate a change in mineral content. It tells them about underground water flow and which plants will be thriving in that area during different seasons. The flight patterns of certain birds aren't just interesting to watch, they're providing real-time information about weather changes hours away. As they crest a small hill, the group encounters something that stops them in their tracks. Below them stretches a valley filled with what appears to be ideal habitat. Abundant water, diverse vegetation, natural shelter formations. It looks like paradise, but the matriarch's reaction is immediate and decisive. She turns the group away from this seemingly perfect location. Why? The answer lies in details that would escape most observers. The water sources are too abundant, which means this valley attracts every predator in the region. The vegetation is too lush, indicating soil conditions that become treacherous during wet seasons. Most importantly, the natural shelter formations are too obvious, too well known to other creatures. This valley is a trap disguised as an opportunity. Instead, she leads them toward what appears to be much less promising terrain. Rocky, sparse, seemingly lacking in resources. But as they explore this area, its hidden advantages become clear. The sparse vegetation actually indicates excellent drainage, meaning this area remains habitable even during heavy rains. The rocky terrain provides numerous microenvironments, each with its own resources and shelter possibilities. Most importantly, the challenging conditions mean fewer competitors for these resources. They begin constructing their next shelter, but this one will be different from the previous night's accommodation. The terrain demands new techniques, new approaches to the fundamental problems of protection and comfort. Watch as they adapt their construction methods to work with these different materials and challenges. The rocks here are different, harder and more angular than the smooth stones they worked with previously. But rather than seeing this as a limitation, they recognize it as an opportunity. These harder stones can be shaped through careful percussion, creating tools and structural elements that weren't possible with softer materials. The process is slow and requires tremendous skill, but they're essentially creating custom building components from raw stone. The vegetation in this area is also different, more sparse, but incredibly hardy. The plants that survive here have developed remarkable properties. Some have waxy coatings that make them naturally waterproof. Others have evolved internal structures that provide exceptional insulation. These early humans have learned to identify and utilize these specialized properties, incorporating them into their construction in ways that dramatically enhance their shelter's performance. As they work, something fascinating becomes apparent. They're not just building for tonight's needs, they're creating a shelter system that can be expanded and modified based on changing conditions. The initial structure is compact and efficient, suitable for a small group in mild weather. But the design includes anchor points and framework elements that allow for rapid expansion if the group grows or if weather conditions become more challenging. This modular approach to construction reveals a level of planning and foresight that challenges our assumptions about early human cognitive abilities. They're not just reacting to immediate needs, they're anticipating future challenges and building flexibility into their solutions. It's engineering thinking applied with materials and techniques that seem primitive but are actually highly sophisticated. The social dynamics during construction are equally revealing. Different members of the group have clearly defined roles, but these roles are fluid and adaptive. The individual with the best understanding of stonework takes the lead when dealing with the rocky foundation. Someone else with superior knowledge of plant materials guides the selection and preparation of organic components. But everyone contributes, everyone learns, and everyone understands how their individual efforts contribute to the group's survival. As afternoon progresses into evening, their new shelter takes shape. It's completely different from the previous night's construction, adapted to different materials and different environmental challenges. Yet the underlying principles remain the same. Multiple levels for different functions, sophisticated ventilation systems, integrated storage solutions, early warning systems to detect approaching threats. But this shelter incorporates innovations that weren't present in the previous design. The harder stones have allowed them to create more precise joints and connections, resulting in a structure that's more stable and weather-resistant. The specialized vegetation provides better insulation and water protection. Most importantly, the challenging terrain has forced them to develop new techniques that will serve them well in future construction projects. As darkness approaches once again, they've created something that would impress modern survival experts. Working with nothing but natural materials and accumulated knowledge, they've built a shelter that provides protection, comfort, and security in an environment that would challenge the most advanced modern equipment. They've turned nature's fury into nature's embrace, transforming a harsh landscape into a temporary home that meets all their complex needs. The night sounds are different here, reflecting the different ecosystem they've chosen to inhabit. But their shelter responds to these new acoustic challenges. It's designed naturally dampening the sounds that might mask approaching dangers, while amplifying the subtle audio cues that provide valuable information about their environment. As they settle in for another night, 5.8 million years removed from our modern world, these remarkable beings have once again demonstrated that intelligence isn't just about brain size or tool use. It's about understanding, adaptation, and the ability to work with natural systems rather than against them. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate the remarkable capabilities that would eventually lead to our modern world. But tonight isn't just about shelter. As the group settles into their rocky refuge, something extraordinary is about to unfold. The real test of their survival skills is just beginning, because staying warm and dry is only half the battle. They need food, and in this landscape, finding it requires knowledge that would take modern humans years to acquire. The matriarch emerges from the shelter as the first stars appear overhead. Her movements are deliberate, purposeful. She's not randomly searching for sustenance. She's reading the landscape like a complex map, interpreting signs that reveal where different food sources can be found, even in complete darkness. The way she tilts her head, listening to the subtle sounds of the night, tells her which directions hold promise and which lead to danger. She signals to two younger members of the group, and they follow her into the darkness with absolute confidence. These aren't desperate foraging expeditions. These are precision operations based on accumulated wisdom about how different plants and small animals behave during nighttime hours. They know which roots are easier to extract when the soil has cooled, which insects emerge only after sunset, which fruits release their ripest specimens during the dark hours. Watch as they approach what appears to be barren ground. To untrained eyes, this area offers nothing, but the matriarch kneels and begins digging with a pointed stick, her movements guided by almost supernatural knowledge of what lies beneath the surface. She's located an underground storage cache created by small mammals, filled with seeds and nuts carefully buried for future consumption. These early humans have learned to read the landscape for signs of such hidden resources. The process isn't theft in any sense we might understand. They take only a portion of what they find, leaving enough to ensure the animal's survival while providing essential nutrition for their own group. It's a form of resource sharing that maintains the delicate balance between competing species. They understand intuitively that destroying their competitors' food sources would ultimately destroy their own survival prospects. Moving through the darkness with remarkable silence, they demonstrate hunting techniques that would amaze modern wildlife experts. Without weapons beyond simple digging sticks and their bare hands, they're capable of capturing small prey through methods that rely entirely on understanding animal behavior. They know which creatures become disoriented by specific sounds, which can be confused by particular movements, which can be cornered using environmental features as natural traps. But perhaps most impressively, they understand timing. The night hours bring opportunities that don't exist during daylight, but those opportunities appear and disappear according to precise natural schedules. Certain insects are vulnerable only during specific temperature ranges. Small mammals emerge to feed only when particular conditions align. These early humans have internalized these complex timing relationships, allowing them to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. As they gather food, they're also gathering information. Every plant they examine teaches them something about soil conditions, water availability, and seasonal changes. Every animal sign they encounter provides data about predator movements, territorial boundaries, and resource competition. They're not just foraging, they're conducting a comprehensive environmental survey that will inform their decisions for days to come. The food preparation process reveals another layer of sophisticated knowledge. Not everything they collect can be consumed immediately. Some items require processing to remove toxins or improve digestibility. Others need to be prepared in ways that maximize their nutritional value or extend their storage life. These early humans have developed techniques for food processing that rival modern understanding of nutrition and food science. Using nothing but stones and plant materials, they're able to break down tough fibers, extract oils and nutrients from seeds, and even ferment certain substances to improve their nutritional profiles. The fermentation process is particularly remarkable, involving carefully controlled conditions that encourage beneficial bacterial growth while preventing harmful contamination. They're practicing food science without laboratories or formal education, guided purely by generations of accumulated experience. The social aspect of food sharing reveals complex cultural of food are distribute patterns, different types according to specific protocols that reflect both nutritional needs and social relationships. The youngest and oldest members receive priority access to the most easily digestible items. Those who contributed most to the day's shelter construction are rewarded with choice portions, but everyone receives adequate nutrition, and no one goes hungry while others feast. This food distribution system isn't just about fairness. It's about survival optimization for the entire group. By ensuring that each individual maintains optimal health and energy levels, they maximize the group's collective ability to face future challenges. They understand that their survival depends not on individual strength, but on group cohesion and mutual support.
Mate,
As the night deepens, they return to their shelter with enough food not just for immediate consumption, but for the following day's journey. The storage techniques they employ are as sophisticated as their construction methods. Different foods are kept in different microenvironments within their shelter, each optimized for preserving specific types of nutrients and preventing spoilage. Some items are buried in the cool soil beneath their sleeping area, where stable temperatures prevent rapid deterioration. Others are suspended in the airflow zones of their shelter, where natural dehydration preserves them without removing essential nutrients. The most perishable foods are consumed immediately, while items with longer storage potential are carefully preserved for future consumption. But survival isn't just about meeting today's needs. These remarkable beings are also preparing for tomorrow's challenges. As they settle in for the night, several group members begin crafting items that will be needed for the next day's journey. Simple tools, carrying containers, even primitive maps scratched into pieces of bark that will help them navigate unfamiliar terrain. The tool-making process reveals yet another dimension of their sophisticated understanding of materials and engineering. They select specific types of wood based not just on availability, but on the precise mechanical properties required for different applications. Harder woods for tools that need to withstand impact. Flexible woods for items that need to bend without breaking. They understand grain patterns, moisture content, and aging processes that affect how different materials will perform under stress. Creating carrying containers from available plant materials demonstrates an understanding of textile engineering that wouldn't be formally recognized by science for millions of years. They weave fibers together in patterns that maximize strength while minimizing weight. They understand how different weaving techniques affect the container's ability to hold different types of materials. Watertight weaves for liquids, breathable patterns for items that need air circulation, reinforced sections for areas that will experience the greatest stress. The primitive maps they create are particularly fascinating. Using combinations of scratches, dots, and simple symbols, they're recording information about terrain features, resource locations, and potential hazards that the group will need to remember during future travels through this area. These aren't just random markings. They're sophisticated information storage systems that allow crucial survival knowledge to be preserved and shared. As they work by the dim light filtering through their shelter walls, their movements are efficient and purposeful. Every action serves multiple functions. The crafting activities provide necessary tools and supplies, but they also serve social functions, creating opportunities for knowledge transfer between generations and strengthening group bonds through shared activities. The night passes peacefully, but morning brings a new set of challenges that will test every skill they've developed. The weather has changed during the night, bringing conditions that weren't anticipated when they selected this shelter location. Heavy clouds have moved in, carrying the promise of severe storms that could make travel dangerous and food gathering nearly impossible. But rather than panicking or simply waiting out the weather, our ancestors demonstrate remarkable adaptability. They begin modifying their shelter to handle the anticipated conditions, adding reinforcements and weatherproofing that will allow them to remain comfortable and safe even during severe storms. More importantly, they begin preparing for the opportunities that severe weather will create. Heavy rains will fill temporary pools with fresh water, allowing them to replenish their supplies without the risks associated with permanent water sources frequented by predators. Storm conditions will drive small animals into predictable shelter locations, creating hunting opportunities that don't exist during normal weather. Flooding will expose root systems and wash nutritious materials into accessible locations. They understand that what appears to be a setback is actually an opportunity for those prepared to take advantage of it, while other creatures huddle in whatever shelter they can find, waiting for conditions to improve. These early humans are positioning themselves to emerge from the storm stronger and better supplied than when it began. The storm preparation reveals their most advanced engineering capabilities. They create water collection systems that will capture and store rainfall for future use. They modify their shelter's ventilation to handle the humidity changes that accompany severe weather. They even create drainage systems that will prevent flooding while directing excess water to areas where it will benefit the local vegetation. As the first raindrops begin to fall, their shelter transformation is complete. What started as a simple overnight accommodation has become a sophisticated weather station, complete with systems for monitoring conditions, collecting resources, and maintaining comfort during extended periods of severe weather. They've turned nature's fury into nature's abundance, demonstrating once again that survival isn't about fighting the environment, but about understanding it well enough to work with its rhythms and patterns. The approaching storm represents just another day in the life of these remarkable beings. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate the incredible adaptability that allowed early humans to not just survive, but to thrive in conditions that would overwhelm modern technology. But tonight, as the rain begins to fall and the wind picks up, they rest safely in their ingenious shelter, protected by nothing more than natural materials arranged with perfect understanding of the forces they're designed to withstand. The storm hits with a ferocity that would send modern humans scrambling for the nearest concrete building. Lightning illuminates the landscape in stark, terrifying flashes, revealing a world transformed by nature's raw power. Wind howls across the savannah, with enough force to uproot trees and send debris flying like missiles. Rain doesn't just fall, it attacks, driving horizontally with stinging intensity that would strip the skin from any creature caught in the open. But inside their ingeniously modified shelter, our ancestors remain remarkably calm. The shelter that seemed so simple during construction now reveals its true sophistication. Every element they added during the storm preparation phase is performing exactly as intended. The water collection systems are channeling the torrential rain away from their living space, while simultaneously filling storage containers they've woven from plant fibers. The reinforced walls flex with the wind rather than fighting it, dissipating the storm's energy harmlessly. Most impressively, the shelter's acoustic design is filtering the chaotic noise of the storm, allowing the group to maintain communication despite the deafening conditions outside. They've created specific sound channels that carry their voices clearly between different sections of the shelter while blocking the worst of the external noise. This isn't accidental engineering. They understand that maintaining group coordination during crisis conditions is essential for survival. As the storm intensifies, watch how they respond to changing conditions. When wind direction shifts, threatening to drive rain into previously protected areas, they smoothly implement contingency plans they developed during construction. Movable panels slide into new positions. Drainage channels are quickly modified to handle water flowing from unexpected directions. They're not reacting desperately to crisis. They're executing a carefully planned response to conditions they anticipated and prepared for. The social dynamics during the storm are equally remarkable. Rather than huddling together in fear, they use this enforced indoor time productively. Skilled group members conduct what can only be described as educational sessions, passing along crucial survival knowledge to younger members through demonstration and guided practice. They're using the storm as an opportunity for cultural transmission, ensuring that essential skills and knowledge continue to flow between generations. One particularly fascinating activity involves what appears to be memory training, using patterns of small stones and sticks. They're teaching complex navigation information to younger group members. These aren't simple maps, but sophisticated mnemonic devices that encode multiple layers of information about terrain features, seasonal changes, resource locations, and hazard warnings. By the time the storm passes, the younger members will have absorbed navigational knowledge that would take modern humans years to acquire. The food sharing continues during the storm, but now it serves additional purposes beyond nutrition. The act of preparing and consuming food together reinforces group bonds during stressful conditions. The careful rationing demonstrates trust and mutual dependence. Most importantly, the continued adherence to their food distribution protocols maintains social stability when external conditions are chaotic and unpredictable. As dawn breaks, the storm begins to weaken, but it doesn't simply end. Instead, it transitions through several phases, each requiring different responses from our ancestors. The initial heavy rain gives way to lighter but more persistent precipitation. Wind patterns change from violent gusts to steady, moderate flows. These transitions would catch most modern survivors off guard, but our ancestors read them like chapters in a familiar book. They emerge from their shelter not when the storm ends, but during a specific phase when conditions are optimal for the activities they need to accomplish. The continuing light rain provides perfect cover for approaching water sources where predators might be sheltering. The reduced but persistent wind carries scents more reliably, allowing them to gather information about their environment from greater distances. They understand that every phase of weather offers unique opportunities for those prepared to recognize and exploit them. The post-storm landscape reveals opportunities that would be invisible to untrained observers. Flash flooding has exposed root systems that are normally buried too deeply to access. The saturated soil makes digging easier while simultaneously bringing earthworms and other protein sources closer to the surface. Most importantly, the storm has displaced many small animals from their normal territories, creating hunting opportunities in areas that are usually unproductive. But they also recognize the increased dangers that storm conditions create. Predators that were sheltering during the worst weather are now emerging hungry and potentially aggressive. Terrain that was stable before the storm may now be treacherous due to erosion or flooding. Water sources that were safe to approach yesterday might now be contaminated or claimed by desperate animals. Every decision requires balancing new opportunities against new risks. Their movement through the post-storm landscape demonstrates navigation skills that would challenge modern GPS systems. Traditional landmarks have been altered or destroyed by the storm. Familiar paths may be blocked by fallen trees or washed out by flooding. Watercourses have changed direction or disappeared entirely. Yet they navigate with confidence, using backup navigation methods that don't depend on any single environmental feature. They read the landscape's recovery patterns, understanding which areas will return to normal conditions quickly and which will remain altered for extended periods. This knowledge informs their route planning, allowing them to take advantage of temporary conditions while avoiding areas that have become permanently more dangerous. They're not just navigating through space, they're navigating through time, understanding how current conditions will evolve and planning their movements accordingly. The group encounters evidence of other human groups that didn't fare as well during the storm. Abandoned shelters that weren't designed to handle severe weather conditions tell stories of groups that were forced to flee during the night. Scattered tools and personal items reveal the chaos that ensues when survival preparations prove inadequate. But rather than simply observing these failures, our ancestors learn from them. They examine the failed shelters carefully, understanding exactly why different design choices led to collapse or abandonment. The scattered items are evaluated not just for potential usefulness, but for what they reveal about the knowledge and skill levels of other groups. This information becomes part of their ongoing intelligence gathering about territorial boundaries, resource competition, and potential allies or threats in the region. As they continue their journey, the landscape continues to reveal the storm's effects. Some changes are immediately obvious: fallen trees, altered waterways, redistributed soil. But other changes are subtle, visible only to eyes trained to read environmental conditions. Slight changes in vegetation patterns that indicate altered drainage. Modified animal trails that reveal how different species are adapting to change conditions. These subtle modifications to the landscape will influence resource availability and predator behavior for months to come. The group adapts their foraging strategies to take advantage of storm-created opportunities while avoiding new hazards. Plants that were previously inaccessible have been brought within reach by fallen trees. Seeds and nuts that were stored in high locations have been scattered by wind and rain. But they also recognize that many traditional food sources may be contaminated or damaged by floodwaters and debris. Their food evaluation techniques become even more sophisticated in post-storm conditions. They test items more carefully, using multiple sensory inputs to determine safety and nutritional value. They understand that plants stressed by storm conditions may have altered chemical compositions, making normally safe foods potentially dangerous. Their knowledge extends to understanding how different plants respond to water stress, soil disruption, and physical damage. As the day progresses, they begin preparing for another night's shelter, but the site selection process is now complicated by storm-altered conditions. Traditional shelter locations may be flooded, damaged, or claimed by displaced animals. New opportunities have been created by fallen trees and altered terrain features, but these require careful evaluation to ensure they provide genuine advantages rather than hidden dangers. The construction process incorporates lessons learned from observing how their previous night's shelter performed during the storm. Successful design elements are retained and refined. Features that proved less effective are modified or replaced entirely. They're engaged in continuous improvement, using each shelter building experience to advance their engineering capabilities. But tonight's shelter construction faces a unique challenge. The storm has altered the availability of construction materials. Some previously abundant resources are now scarce due to storm damage. Others that were rare have become more accessible. They demonstrate remarkable adaptability, modifying their construction techniques to work effectively with whatever materials the altered landscape provides. The social dynamics during construction have evolved as well. The storm experience has strengthened group bonds, while also clarifying individual capabilities and limitations. Task assignments are now based on demonstrated performance under stress, rather than simply traditional roles. The group's efficiency has increased because they've learned to work together more effectively under challenging conditions. As evening approaches, their new shelter takes shape. It incorporates both proven design principles and innovations inspired by their storm experience. The structure is more robust than previous constructions, designed to handle severe weather from the beginning, rather than requiring emergency modifications. But it also includes new features that take advantage of lessons learned during the storm about water management, acoustic design, and social space organization. The completed shelter represents an evolutionary step forward in their construction capabilities. Each challenge they've faced has contributed to their growing understanding of how to work with natural materials and environmental conditions. They're not just surviving in this harsh landscape, they're adapting and improving their techniques with each passing day. As darkness falls once again, they settle into their newest temporary home. The sounds of the night are different following the storm, reflecting changes in animal behavior and environmental conditions. But their shelter's acoustic design adapts to these new conditions, continuing to provide both protection and information about their surroundings. The storm has passed, but its effects will influence their survival strategies for days to come. Water sources will remain altered until normal weather patterns return. Animal behavior will be disrupted as different species adapt to change territorial boundaries. Vegetation will respond to the moisture and soil disruption in ways that create both opportunities and challenges for future foraging. Tomorrow will bring new tests of their adaptability as they continue their journey through a landscape still recovering from nature's fury. But tonight, protected by their ingenious shelter, and warmed by the knowledge that they've successfully weathered another crisis. These remarkable beings rest peacefully. They've once again demonstrated that intelligence isn't about controlling nature, but about understanding it deeply enough to work with its most powerful forces. The cycle continues, each day bringing new challenges that demand creative solutions, new opportunities that reward careful observation, and new lessons that advance their growing mastery of survival in one of Earth's most demanding environments. They are our ancestors, the foundation upon which all human achievement would eventually rest, proving night after night that adaptation, cooperation, and deep environmental knowledge could overcome any obstacle that nature placed in their path. The morning after the storm brings a discovery that changes everything. As the group ventures out to assess the transformed landscape, the matriarch stops abruptly at what appears to be an unremarkable patch of muddy ground. But her trained eyes see something extraordinary. The storm waters have receded, leaving behind a series of perfectly preserved footprints pressed deep into what was once soft clay, now hardened by the morning sun. These aren't just any footprints. They tell a story that sends ripples of tension through the group. The tracks belong to a massive predator, something far larger than the big cats they've learned to avoid. The spacing between prints indicates an animal with a stride length that dwarfs anything in their experience. More concerning, the depth and clarity of the impressions suggest this creature passed by recently, possibly while they were sheltered during the storm. But instead of panic, watch what happens next. The matriarch kneels beside the tracks, her fingers tracing the edges with scientific precision. She's reading them like text, extracting information that will inform every decision they make for the next several days. The shape of the pads tells her about the creature's weight distribution, and likely hunting-style lore marks reveal the sea, whether it was moving casually or with predatory intent. Most crucially, the freshness of the tracks indicates exactly when this encounter occurred. The group gathers around as she shares her analysis through the complex system of gestures and soft vocalizations they've developed. This isn't just information sharing, it's collaborative intelligence gathering. Each member contributes observations based on their particular expertise. Someone notices disturbed vegetation that indicates the direction of travel. Another spots scent markers that reveal territorial behavior. Together, they're building a complete picture of a threat that could reshape their entire survival strategy. The decision-making process that follows demonstrates cognitive abilities that challenge our assumptions about early human intelligence. They don't simply flee from the area or hunker down in fear. Instead, they begin what can only be described as tactical planning. Using combinations of natural landmarks and scratch patterns in the dirt, they map out the predator's likely territorial range, hunting patterns, and preferred travel routes. This analysis reveals something remarkable. Rather than viewing this massive predator as an insurmountable threat, they begin to see it as an opportunity. Large predators create ecological effects that extend far beyond their immediate presence. Their hunting activities concentrate prey animals in predictable locations. Their territorial boundaries create safe corridors where smaller creatures can move without fear. Most importantly, their kill sites provide scavenging opportunities for those clever enough to approach safely. The group begins modifying their travel plans, but not to avoid the predator. Instead, they're positioning themselves to take advantage of the ecological opportunities its presence creates. They understand that following a large predator at a safe distance can provide access to resources that would otherwise be unavailable. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy that requires perfect timing and flawless execution. As they begin this dangerous game of ecological chess, their movement patterns become incredibly sophisticated. They travel in a formation that maximizes their ability to detect the predator's location while minimizing their own visibility. They use natural features as both concealment and communication aids, creating a mobile intelligence network that can track threats and opportunities across vast distances. The tracking techniques they employ would impress modern wildlife biologists. They read the landscape for signs invisible to untrained eyes. Disturbed vegetation patterns that indicate recent passage, scent markers that reveal emotional states and territorial claims. Even the behavior of smaller animals provides crucial intelligence about larger predators in the area. Birds that fall silent indicate nearby threats. Insects that alter their activity patterns reveal chemical traces left by passing mammals. But this isn't just passive tracking. They're actively managing their own scent trail and visual signature to remain undetected. They use specific plants to mask their human odors, rubbing aromatic leaves on their skin and clothing. They modify their gait and group spacing to create footprint patterns that might be mistaken for different species. They even time their movements to coincide with natural events that will mask the sounds of their passage. The psychological pressure of operating so close to apex predators would overwhelm most modern humans. But these early ancestors have developed mental techniques for managing fear and maintaining operational effectiveness under extreme stress. They practice what we might call meditation, using controlled breathing and focused attention to maintain calm awareness during high-stress situations. Their communication systems become even more sophisticated under these conditions. They develop subtle signals that can convey complex information without creating sounds or movements that might attract unwanted attention. Hand positions that indicate specific types of threats. Body postures that communicate emotional states and readiness levels. Even the timing of normal activities like grooming becomes part of their tactical communication network. As they track the massive predator through increasingly challenging terrain, they encounter evidence of its hunting success. A kill site where something large met its end reveals both the creature's capabilities and its behavioral patterns. But rather than simply observing from a distance, they begin a careful approach that demonstrates courage bordering on reckless audacity. The scavenging operation that follows is a masterpiece of timing and coordination. They understand exactly how long they have before the predator returns to protect its kill. They know which parts of the carcass to target for maximum nutritional benefit with minimum processing time. Most importantly, they understand how to approach and withdraw without leaving evidence of their presence that might anger the predator or alert it to their continued proximity. The meat they obtain represents more than just food. It's protein of a quality and quantity that will fuel their activities for days to come, but processing and preserving it requires techniques that push their technological capabilities to their limits. Using sharp stones and patient effort, they break down the carcass into manageable portions. They identify which cuts will provide immediate energy and which are better suited for preservation and future consumption. The preservation process reveals another dimension of their sophisticated understanding of food science. They create drying racks using available wood and plant materials, positioning them to take advantage of natural air currents while protecting the meat from insects and scavenging birds. They use salt obtained from mineral deposits to accelerate the preservation process. They even employ smoke from specific types of burning plant material that adds flavor while providing additional antimicrobial protection. But perhaps most remarkably, they're doing all of this while maintaining constant vigilance for the return of the predator whose kill they've appropriated. The entire operation unfolds with military precision, every team member understanding their role and timing their activities to maximize efficiency while minimizing exposure time. As they complete their scavenging operation and begin moving away from the kill site, they demonstrate cleanup techniques designed to minimize evidence of their presence. They scatter remaining scraps in patterns that mimic natural scavenging by smaller animals. They use water and specific plant materials to remove scent traces that might alert the returning predator. They even modify the surrounding vegetation to disguise the signs of their activity. The withdrawal from the kill site is as carefully orchestrated as the approach. They move in stages, with advanced scouts ensuring their route remains clear, while rearguards monitor for any signs of the predator's return. Their formation and timing are designed to get everyone to safety while maintaining the ability to scatter and hide if the situation deteriorates rapidly. Once they reach a safe distance from the kill site, they begin processing their bounty more thoroughly. The meat requires additional treatment to ensure it remains safe and nutritious during transport and storage. They create portable preservation systems that will maintain food quality even during extended travel through challenging terrain. But the psychological impact of their successful scavenging operation extends far beyond the immediate nutritional benefits. They've demonstrated to themselves that even the largest and most dangerous predators in their environment can be outmaneuvered through intelligence, planning, and coordinated group action. This confidence boost will influence their behavior and decision-making for weeks to come. The knowledge they've gained about predator behavior will also prove invaluable in future survival situations. They now understand the hunting patterns, territorial behaviors, and ecological impact of apex predators in ways that will inform their strategic planning indefinitely. Every encounter has added to their growing database of environmental intelligence. As they continue their journey, carrying their preserved meat and the confidence that comes from successfully completing an extremely dangerous operation, they encounter terrain that presents new challenges. The storm and its aftermath have created temporary geographic features that didn't exist when they last traveled through this region. Temporary streams, altered vegetation patterns, and modified animal trails require constant adaptation of their navigation and survival strategies. The landscape continues to recover from the storm, but that recovery creates its own opportunities and hazards. Some changes will be permanent, altering resource availability and predator territories for years to come. Others are temporary, creating brief windows of opportunity for those prepared to recognize and exploit them. Understanding the difference between permanent and temporary changes requires environmental knowledge of extraordinary depth and sophistication. Their ability to read and adapt to these constantly changing conditions represents the cutting edge of survival technology for their time period. They're not just reacting to environmental challenges, they're anticipating them. They're not just exploiting existing opportunities, they're creating new ones through their interactions with the landscape. As evening approaches, they begin the now familiar process of selecting and preparing their next shelter site. But tonight's construction will incorporate everything they've learned from their recent experiences. The proximity of large predators requires enhanced security measures. The abundance of preserved meat demands improved storage systems. The constantly changing environmental conditions necessitate more flexible and adaptable design approaches. The shelter that emerges from their efforts represents the culmination of several days' worth of accumulated knowledge and experience. It's more sophisticated than their previous constructions, incorporating innovations inspired by each challenge they've faced. More importantly, it reflects their growing confidence and capability as they continue to master survival in one of Earth's most demanding environments. As they settle in for another night, surrounded by the sounds of a landscape still adjusting to recent changes, they represent something remarkable in human evolution. They're not just surviving, they're innovating. Each challenge has made them more capable. Each success has increased their confidence. Each day has added to their growing mastery of techniques that will eventually enable human expansion across the entire planet. Tomorrow will bring new tests of their adaptability and intelligence. The landscape will continue to change. New predators will emerge. Resources will shift in availability and location. But tonight, warm, fed, and protected by their ingenious construction, these remarkable beings rest peacefully, having once again demonstrated that human intelligence, properly applied, could overcome any challenge that nature placed in their path. The legacy of their innovations will echo through millions of years of human development. The principles they're discovering through trial and error will eventually inform architecture, engineering, and environmental science. The social cooperation they're perfecting will become the foundation for all human civilization. But right now, 5.8 million years ago, they're simply doing what they've always done, adapting, innovating, and surviving against impossible odds, one shelter at a time. As the new dawn breaks over the East African landscape, our ancestors face a challenge that would stagger modern humans. The preserved meat from yesterday's dangerous scavenging operation has attracted attention. Not from the massive predator whose kill they appropriated, but from something potentially more dangerous. Other human groups. The matriarch's keen eyes spot the telltale signs first. Smoke rising in the distance, not from natural fires, but from deliberately constructed hearths. The pattern of the smoke tells her everything she needs to know. Multiple groups, possibly territorial competitors, have converged in this area. The rich resources created by recent storm activity have drawn human populations from across the region, setting the stage for conflicts that could determine survival for everyone involved. But watch what happens next. Instead of immediately fleeing or preparing for confrontation, she begins what can only be described as intelligence gathering on a scale that would impress modern military strategists. Using elevation changes in the terrain and natural camouflage, members of her group begin systematic observation of the approaching human populations. They're not just counting numbers or assessing weapons. They're analyzing social structures, technological capabilities, and behavioral patterns that will inform their strategic response. The information they gather reveals a complex situation. Some of the approaching groups appear to be family units like their own, driven by the same resource opportunities that brought them to this area. Others show signs of being specialized hunting parties, potentially more aggressive and territorial. Most concerning, there's evidence of at least one group that displays signs of desperation, the dangerous unpredictability that comes from extended periods of unsuccessful foraging. The decision-making process that follows demonstrates social and political intelligence that challenges everything we thought we knew about early human cognitive abilities. They don't simply choose between fight or flight. Instead, they begin developing what can only be called diplomatic strategies. They understand that in a resource-rich environment, cooperation might yield better results than competition, but only if approached with the right combination of strength and restraint. The preparation phase reveals technologies and techniques we've never seen them use before. They begin creating display items, not weapons exactly, but objects designed to communicate their capabilities and intentions to other human groups. Carefully crafted tools that demonstrate technological sophistication, arrangements of their preserved meat that show abundance without creating vulnerability, even modifications to their personal appearance that signal both peaceful intentions and defensive readiness. Their approach to intergroup contact is methodical and sophisticated. They don't simply walk hostile territory hoping into potentially for the best. Instead, they create what we might call neutral meeting grounds, locations where different groups can interact with minimized risk to any party. They use natural landscape features to create spaces that offer security to all participants while preventing any single group from gaining tactical advantages. The first contact occurs at sunrise, when visibility is optimal and the morning's activities haven't yet created the tensions that accumulate during the day. The matriarch approaches the meeting ground, accompanied by two others, a formation that demonstrates confidence without aggression. Their body language, posture, and movements convey complex messages about their intentions, capabilities, and willingness to cooperate or defend themselves if necessary. The communication that follows transcends anything we might expect from beings with limited vocal capabilities. They've developed a sophisticated sign language that allows complex information exchange between groups that may speak different proto-languages or use different vocal communication systems. Hand gestures, body positions, and environmental manipulations combine to create a rich communication medium that enables detailed negotiations about territory, resources, and mutual cooperation. What emerges from these negotiations is remarkable. Rather than fighting over the storm-created abundance, the various groups begin coordinating their activities to maximize benefits for everyone involved. They establish informal territorial boundaries that prevent conflicts while ensuring each group has access to essential resources. They create information-sharing protocols that allow groups to warn each other about predator movements and resource discoveries. Most impressively, they begin collaborative hunting and foraging operations that leverage the specialized knowledge and capabilities of different groups. One group's expertise in tracking large game combines with another's knowledge of plant resources and a third's understanding of water sources. The result is resource exploitation on a scale that none of the individual groups could achieve alone. The social structures that emerge during these collaborative operations provide insights into the origins of human political organization. Leadership roles are fluid, shifting based on the specific challenges being addressed. The group with the best tracking skills leads during hunting operations. Those with superior plant knowledge guide foraging expeditions. The most experienced builders direct shelter construction projects that accommodate multiple groups simultaneously. But cooperation doesn't eliminate competition entirely. Instead, it channels competitive impulses into productive directions. Groups compete to contribute the most valuable resources to collaborative efforts. They compete to demonstrate superior technologies and techniques. They compete to provide the most useful information about environmental conditions and opportunities. Competition becomes a driver of innovation rather than a source of destructive conflict. The temporary settlement that emerges from this multi-group cooperation is unlike anything these early humans have created before. It's not just larger than their typical family group shelters. It's qualitatively different, incorporating specialized areas for different activities and different groups. Communal spaces for shared meals and social interaction. Private areas where individual groups can maintain their distinct identities. Storage systems that protect each group's resources while enabling sharing when beneficial. The construction techniques required for this expanded settlement push their engineering capabilities to new levels. They're not just scaling up their existing methods, they're developing entirely new approaches to structural engineering, resource management, and social space design. The solutions they develop will influence human settlement patterns for millennia to come. The social dynamics within this temporary multi-group settlement reveal the origins of many aspects of human culture that we take for granted. The development of shared customs and protocols that allow different groups to coexist peacefully. The emergence of specialized roles and occupations that serve the broader community rather than just individual family groups. The creation of formal and informal governance mechanisms that manage conflicts and coordinate group activities. Food sharing within this larger community becomes particularly complex and sophisticated. Different groups contribute different types of resources based on their specializations and the territories they control. The distribution systems that emerge ensure equitable access to diverse nutrition sources while maintaining the social bonds that hold the community together. They're practicing economics, developing systems for resource allocation that balance individual needs with community stability. The educational opportunities created by multi-group cooperation accelerate knowledge transfer and technological development. Techniques and information that might have taken generations to spread between isolated family groups are now shared directly through hands-on demonstration and collaborative practice. Young people from different groups learn from multiple teachers, acquiring broader skill sets and more diverse perspectives on survival challenges. The cultural exchange that occurs during this collaboration provides insights into the origins of human art, music, and storytelling. Different groups share their unique approaches to creating meaning and beauty within the harsh constraints of survival existence. They compare techniques for creating decorative objects, for producing sounds that serve both practical and aesthetic functions, for preserving and transmitting important information through memorable narratives. But this golden period of cooperation faces constant challenges. The abundance that brought the groups together is temporary. Storm-created resources are being rapidly depleted by the expanded population. Competition from other species increases as word spreads about the rich feeding grounds. Most critically, the seasonal changes that drive migration patterns are approaching, potentially forcing groups to abandon this collaborative experiment and return to their traditional territories. The decision-making process about whether to maintain cooperation or return to independent operation reveals sophisticated understanding of trade-offs and long-term consequences. They're weighing the immediate benefits of continued collaboration against the risks of overstaying in one location. They're considering whether the social bonds they've created can survive the transition back to independent existence. They're evaluating whether the technologies and techniques they've developed through cooperation will remain accessible if the groups separate. The resolution they reach demonstrates wisdom that would be impressive in any era. Rather than simply dissolving the cooperation when immediate circumstances change, they create mechanisms for maintaining beneficial relationships, even when the groups are geographically separated. They establish protocols for future meetings and resource sharing. They create systems for long-distance communication that will allow continued information exchange. Most importantly, they formalize the cultural and technological exchanges that have occurred, ensuring that the innovations developed through cooperation become permanent additions to each group's capabilities. As the various groups begin preparing for their eventual separation, they're not just returning to their pre-cooperation states. They've all been fundamentally changed by the experience. Each group now possesses knowledge, techniques, and social capabilities that didn't exist before their collaboration. They've learned not just how to cooperate with other human groups, but why such cooperation can be beneficial even when it requires sacrificing some independence and autonomy. The final nights of the multi-group settlement are marked by activities that seem almost ceremonial in nature. They're not just practical preparations for departure, but social rituals that reinforce the bonds they've created and formalize the commitments they've made to future cooperation. These rituals represent some of the earliest expressions of human symbolic behavior. The use of actions and objects to represent abstract concepts and social relationships. As morning arrives and the various groups begin their departures, they're carrying with them more than just the resources they've gathered during their collaboration. They're carrying new technologies, new social structures, and new understanding of human potential. The temporary settlement they're abandoning will fade back into the landscape within days, but the changes they've created in themselves and each other will influence human development for countless generations. The matriarch leads her group away from the settlement site, but their route and destination have been influenced by their collaboration experience. They're traveling toward territories that will allow continued contact with some of the groups they've worked with. They're carrying tools and techniques developed through cooperation that will make their independent survival more successful. Most importantly, they're carrying social knowledge that will inform their interactions with other human groups throughout the rest of their lives. The landscape they're entering is the same terrain they've traveled before, but they're experiencing it differently now. Their expanded knowledge base allows them to recognize opportunities and resources they might have missed during previous passages. Their enhanced social capabilities enable them to interact more effectively with other groups they encounter. Their improved technologies make them more efficient at extracting resources and creating shelter in challenging conditions. As they establish their first post-collaboration camp, the construction techniques they employ demonstrate how much they've advanced during their period of cooperation. The shelter they create is more sophisticated than anything they built before their multi-group experience. It incorporates innovations borrowed from other groups, techniques developed through collaborative problem solving, and design principles that reflect their expanded understanding of human social needs. The evening meal preparation reveals similar advances. The food processing techniques they now employ were learned from groups with different cultural backgrounds and environmental approaches from multiple traditions' experiences. The preservation methods they use combine, creating hybrid techniques that are more effective than any of the original methods. Even their food distribution protocols reflect the social innovations developed during their collaboration period. As night falls on this new chapter of their journey, they represent something unprecedented in human evolution. They're not just individual survivors, or even successful family groups. They're carriers of cultural innovation, ambassadors of cooperation, and pioneers of social technologies that will eventually transform human existence. Their brief experience of multi-group collaboration has given them capabilities and perspectives that will influence every aspect of their future survival efforts. The sounds of the night around their new camp include calls and signals from some of the other groups they collaborated with, now also establishing their own independent camps in the broader region. These groups remain in loose contact, sharing information about resource discoveries and predator movements. They've created an informal network that extends their effective knowledge and capabilities far beyond what any individual group could achieve alone. Tomorrow will bring new challenges as they continue adapting to the post-storm landscape and the seasonal changes that drive their migration patterns. But they'll face these challenges with enhanced capabilities, broader perspectives, and social connections that fundamentally alter their survival prospects. They've discovered that human intelligence and adaptability reach their full potential not in isolation, but through cooperation and cultural exchange. The fire that warms them tonight burns with wood, shared by multiple groups during their collaboration. The tools they'll use tomorrow incorporate techniques learned from diverse cultural backgrounds. The stories they'll tell their children will include accounts of successful cooperation with other human groups, planting seeds of social possibility that will grow into the complex civilizations of the future. As they settle into sleep, protected by their ingenious shelter and warmed by the knowledge of their expanded capabilities, these remarkable beings have once again demonstrated the power of human adaptability. But this time, they've shown that adaptation extends beyond individual survival to encompass social innovation, cultural exchange, and the creation of human networks that multiply individual capabilities through cooperative effort. The legacy of their multi-group collaboration will ripple through human development for millions of years. The social technologies they've pioneered will evolve into the complex institutions that govern modern human societies. The cultural exchange mechanisms they've created will become the foundation for human art, science, and philosophy. But tonight, 5.8 million years ago, they're simply what they've always been. Remarkable beings who refuse to be limited by apparent constraints, who transform every challenge into an opportunity for growth, and who continuously redefine what it means to be human in an unforgiving world. The weeks following their multi-group collaboration mark a profound transformation in how our ancestors understand their place in the world. As they traverse familiar territories with their expanded knowledge and enhanced capabilities, they begin to recognize patterns that were previously invisible to them. The landscape hasn't changed, but their ability to read its secrets has evolved dramatically. Watch as they approach a river crossing that would have posed significant challenges during their previous travels through this region. The matriarch examines the water with eyes trained by collaborative learning from groups with different environmental expertise. She's not just assessing depth and current strength anymore. She's reading the subtle signs that reveal seasonal patterns, predator territories, and resource opportunities that extend far beyond this immediate crossing point. The techniques she employs to evaluate the crossing demonstrate knowledge synthesis that would impress modern hydrologists. She understands how recent rainfall patterns upstream will affect water levels in the coming days. She recognizes which types of aquatic vegetation indicate safe ford points versus treacherous underwater obstacles. Most remarkably, She's reading the behavior of animals on both sides of the river to determine which crossing points are actively used by different species. Information that will inform both safety considerations and hunting opportunities. But the river crossing reveals something even more extraordinary about their evolved capabilities. As they prepare to traverse the water, they begin implementing crossing techniques that were developed during their collaborative period, but never actually tested under real-world conditions. They're applying theoretical knowledge gained through cultural exchange to practical survival challenges, demonstrating cognitive flexibility that challenges our understanding of early human intellectual capabilities. The crossing formation they adopt maximizes safety while minimizing travel time, but it also incorporates communication protocols that allow real-time adjustment to changing conditions. The strongest swimmers take positions that enable rapid response to emergencies while maintaining the ability to assist weaker group members. The most experienced navigators monitor water conditions and adjust the crossing route based on moment-to-moment changes in current patterns and underwater obstacles. As they enter the water, their movements reveal training and preparation that occurred during their collaborative period. They've practiced these techniques in safer environments, developing muscle memory and coordination that now serves them perfectly under challenging conditions. They move through the water with confidence born of preparation rather than simply hoping for the best outcome. The successful crossing represents more than just reaching the other side of the river. It demonstrates their ability to apply collaborative learning to independent challenges, validating the investment they made in multi-group cooperation, even after the immediate benefits have ended. They've proven to themselves that the knowledge gained through cultural exchange has permanent value that extends far beyond the specific circumstances in which it was acquired. Once across the river, they encounter terrain that presents entirely new categories of challenges. The landscape on this side has been altered by geological activity that occurred during recent storms, creating features that didn't exist during their previous travels through the region. Ancient riverbeds have been reactivated by floodwaters, creating temporary streams that will disappear within weeks. Rock formations have shifted, opening new caves while blocking traditional shelter sites. Their response to these changed conditions reveals the full extent of their evolved adaptive capabilities. Rather than simply avoiding unfamiliar terrain or attempting to force their way through using familiar techniques, they begin systematic exploration that leverages their expanded knowledge base. They're not just reacting to immediate obstacles, they're conducting comprehensive environmental assessment that will inform their long-term survival strategies in this altered landscape. The exploration techniques they employ combine individual expertise with collaborative learning in ways that multiply their effectiveness. One group member applies tracking skills enhanced by cooperation with groups that specialized in different types of terrain reading. Another uses plant identification knowledge expanded through cultural exchange with groups from different ecological zones. Together they're conducting scientific survey work that would be impressive in any era. Their findings reveal opportunities that would have been invisible to them before their collaborative experience. The geological changes that threatening have appear initially actually created microclimates and resource concentrations that offer significant advantages for those prepared to exploit them. New water sources have emerged where underground streams have been redirected by shifting rock formations. Previously inaccessible mineral deposits have been exposed by erosion and landslide activity. Most importantly, the altered terrain has created natural defensive positions and shelter sites that offer unprecedented security, combined with excellent resource access. These locations would have been recognizable to groups with certain types of specialized geological knowledge, but our ancestors can now identify and evaluate them because of techniques learned during their collaborative period. The site they select for their new base camp demonstrates the full integration of individual and collaborative knowledge. The location offers multiple advantages that were identified through different analytical approaches learned from different cooperating groups. The water access was evaluated using hydrological techniques. The defensive positioning was assessed through military strategic thinking. The resource potential was analysed using ecological knowledge systems. The construction project that follows represents the culmination of everything they've learned about working with natural materials and environmental conditions. But now their techniques incorporate innovations that were developed through collaborative problem solving during their multi-group period. They're not just building a shelter, they're creating an integrated environmental management system that will support extended occupation of this territory. The foundation work reveals engineering principles that were developed through cooperation between groups with different geological expertise. They understand soil stability, drainage patterns, and structural load distribution in ways that enable construction techniques far more sophisticated than anything they attempted during their independent operations. They're creating permanent improvements to the landscape that will benefit future occupation by any human groups. The structural framework incorporates architectural innovations that emerged from cultural exchange between groups with different building traditions. They're combining the best elements of multiple construction approaches while eliminating the weaknesses that collaborative analysis revealed in each individual system. The result is hybrid architecture that performs better than any of the contributing techniques. The material preparation processes demonstrate manufacturing capabilities that were enhanced through collaborative learning. They're processing plant and mineral materials using techniques that were shared between groups during their cooperation period. But they're not simply copying borrowed methods. They're adapting and improving them based on local conditions and available resources. The specialized tools they create during construction represent technological advancement that occurred through collaborative innovation. These aren't just individual improvements to existing tools, but entirely new categories of implements that were invented through cooperative problem solving between groups with complementary expertise. They're creating technology that didn't exist before their collaborative experience. As the construction progresses, the social organization of the work reveals management capabilities that were developed during their multi-group cooperation. They're coordinating complex activities that require precise timing and resource allocation. They're managing quality control processes that ensure structural integrity while maximizing efficiency. They're practicing project management skills that will serve them throughout their future survival efforts. The completed base camp represents something unprecedented in their experience. It's not just more sophisticated than their previous constructions, it's qualitatively different. They've created an integrated system that manages water, provides security, offers storage and workspace, and even includes areas designated for cultural and social activities that have no immediate survival function, but contribute to group cohesion and individual well-being. The environmental management systems they've incorporated demonstrate understanding that extends far beyond immediate survival needs. They've created waste management processes that maintain sanitary conditions while recycling organic materials to improve local soil fertility. They've established water collection and purification systems that provide abundant clean water while supporting local plant growth. They've designed the entire installation to work with natural ecological processes rather than against them. The defensive capabilities of their new base camp reflect military strategic thinking that was developed through collaboration with groups that face different types of security challenges. They've created multiple defensive layers that provide protection against various threats while maintaining the ability to evacuate rapidly if circumstances require abandonment of the site. They understand that perfect security is impossible, but they've minimized their vulnerabilities while maximizing their response options. The resource processing facilities they've constructed enable activities that were previously impossible during independent operations. They can now undertake long-term food preservation projects that will support extended occupation of favorable territories. They can manufacture tools and equipment that require extended processing time and specialized facilities. They can conduct activities that benefit the entire group while remaining secure against external threats. As they settle into their new base camp for what may be an extended occupation, they begin activities that represent entirely new categories of human behavior. They're not just surviving day to day anymore, they're planning and implementing long-term strategies that extend weeks and months into the future. They're creating surplus resources that enable activities beyond immediate survival needs. The surplus production capabilities they've developed allow them to support group members in specialized roles that don't contribute directly to daily survival, but enhance long-term group capabilities. Some individuals can focus on tool development and manufacturing. Others can concentrate on environmental monitoring and intelligence gathering. Still others can dedicate time to cultural activities that strengthen group bonds and preserve important knowledge. The cultural activities that emerge during this period of resource abundance provide insights into the origins of human art, music, and storytelling. But these aren't just recreational pastimes. They're sophisticated information processing and preservation systems. They're creating methods for storing and transmitting complex knowledge that can't be preserved through direct demonstration alone. The artistic creations they produce serve multiple functions beyond aesthetic expression. They encode important survival information in memorable formats that can be preserved and transmitted across generations. They create identity markers that strengthen group cohesion while distinguishing their group from others. They provide media for experimenting with symbolic representation and abstract thinking. The musical activities they engage in demonstrate understanding of acoustic principles and social psychology that was enhanced through collaborative learning. They're creating sounds that serve communication functions, emotional regulation purposes, and group coordination needs. They're developing cultural practices that will influence human social organization for millennia to come. The storytelling traditions they established during this period represent some of the earliest forms of human literature and historical preservation. They're creating narrative frameworks that allow complex information about survival techniques, environmental conditions, and social relationships to be preserved in memorable formats. They're laying the foundation for cultural transmission systems that will enable human knowledge to accumulate across generations. But perhaps most remarkably, they're beginning to engage in activities that can only be described as scientific research. Their abundant resources and secure base camp enable systematic investigation of environmental phenomena that were previously observed only incidentally during survival activities. They're conducting controlled experiments to test hypotheses about natural processes and resource management techniques. The research activities they undertake reveal cognitive capabilities that challenge our assumptions about early human intellectual development. They're formulating questions about natural phenomena, designing methods for testing potential answers, and drawing conclusions that inform their practical activities. They're practicing scientific methodology without formal training or institutional support. Their investigations into plant growth and food production represent some of humanity's earliest agricultural research. They're experimenting with seed selection, soil preparation, and water management techniques that will eventually lead to domestication and farming. They're not just gathering wild resources anymore. They're beginning to manage and modify natural systems to increase their productivity. The animal behavior studies they conduct provide insights that enhance both their hunting capabilities and their understanding of ecological relationships. They're systematically observing and documenting animal behavior patterns, feeding preferences, and territorial arrangements. They're building comprehensive databases of information that will inform their survival strategies indefinitely. Their environmental monitoring activities reveal understanding of climate patterns, seasonal changes, and long-term ecological trends that extends far beyond immediate survival needs. They're tracking environmental indicators that allow prediction of future conditions weeks and months in advance. They're developing forecasting capabilities that provide strategic advantages in resource planning and territorial management. As weeks pass in their sophisticated base camp, they're not just maintaining their enhanced capabilities, they're continuing to develop them. The secure environment and abundant resources enable continued innovation and experimentation. They're pushing the boundaries of what's possible with available materials and technologies. They're creating capabilities that didn't exist before their collaborative experience and wouldn't be possible without their current resource abundance. The advanced tool technologies they developed during this period incorporate multiple innovations that were sparked by collaborative learning, but refined through independent experimentation. They're creating specialized implements that enable activities previously impossible with basic survival tools. They're manufacturing equipment that enhances their effectiveness in every aspect of survival and resource management. The social institutions they established during this extended occupation represent early forms of human governance and organization. They're creating formal and informal systems for decision-making, conflict resolution, and resource allocation that extend beyond simple family group dynamics. They're developing political technologies that will influence human social organization for countless generations. As their extended occupation of the base camp continues, they face new categories of challenges that test their evolved capabilities in unexpected ways. The very success of their resource management and environmental modification activities begins to attract attention from other species and other human groups. Their abundance becomes both an asset and a vulnerability that requires new forms of strategic thinking and defensive planning. The solutions they develop to these success-generated challenges demonstrate adaptive capabilities that represent the cutting edge of human evolutionary development. They're not just solving immediate problems anymore. They're anticipating future challenges and developing capabilities that will serve them throughout their continued development as the most adaptable species on Earth. The management of their newfound abundance creates complexities that would challenge modern economists. As their base camp attracts increasing attention from both competing human groups and opportunistic wildlife, our ancestors must develop entirely new categories of strategic thinking. They're no longer just surviving in their environment, they're actively reshaping it, and that reshaping creates ripple effects that extend far beyond their immediate territory. Watch as scouts return with disturbing intelligence about human groups gathering in the surrounding region. These aren't the collaborative partners from their earlier multi-group cooperation. These are desperate populations, driven by resource scarcity and willing to take by force what they cannot obtain through their own efforts. The matriarch's response reveals strategic thinking that would impress modern military planners. Rather than simply strengthening their defenses or abandoning their successful base camp, she begins implementing what can only be described as regional resource management strategies. She understands that their abundance exists within a broader ecological and social context that must be managed holistically if their success is to be sustainable. Hoarding resources while neighboring groups starve will inevitably lead to conflicts that threaten everyone's survival. The solution she develops demonstrates diplomatic and economic thinking that challenges our assumptions about early human cognitive capabilities. She begins creating resource-sharing networks that provide neighboring groups with access to some of their surplus production while maintaining the security and productivity advantages of their base camp. It's a sophisticated balancing act that requires precise calibration of generosity and self-protection. The implementation of these sharing networks reveals logistical capabilities that were developed through their collaborative experience but are now being applied to much more complex challenges. They create distribution systems that deliver resources to multiple recipient groups while maintaining security against potential theft or attack. They establish communication protocols that allow real-time coordination of resource transfers and security arrangements. But perhaps most remarkably, they begin creating what we might call economic incentives that encourage recipient groups to contribute to the overall security and productivity of the region, rather than simply consuming shared resources. They're not just giving away surplus production, they're creating systems that multiply the benefits of cooperation while minimizing the risks of exploitation. The governance structures that emerge from these expanded resource-sharing networks represent some of the earliest forms of human political organization beyond simple family group dynamics. They create decision-making processes that involve multiple groups while maintaining each group's autonomy and cultural identity. They develop conflict resolution mechanisms that prevent resource disputes from escalating into destructive violence. The success of these regional management strategies attracts even more attention from human populations across an increasingly wide area. Word spreads through primitive communication networks about the abundance and security available in this region. Migration patterns begin shifting as groups abandon less productive territories and move toward this new center of prosperity and innovation. Managing this influx of new populations creates challenges that push their organizational capabilities to unprecedented levels. They must evaluate each arriving group's intentions, capabilities, and potential contributions while maintaining security against possible threats. They must integrate useful newcomers into their resource-sharing networks without overwhelming the systems they've created or diluting the benefits available to existing participants. The screening processes they develop for evaluating new arrivals demonstrate psychological and social assessment capabilities that would be impressive in any era. They can quickly determine whether arriving groups are potential collaborators, harmless refugees, or dangerous competitors. They understand how to test intentions, evaluate capabilities, and predict behavior patterns based on limited initial contact. The integration procedures they create for incorporating acceptable newcomers reveals sophisticated understanding of social dynamics and cultural psychology. They know how to introduce new groups to existing networks without disrupting established relationships. They understand how to assign roles and territories that utilize newcomers' capabilities while maintaining the stability and productivity of existing arrangements. But not all arriving groups prove suitable for integration into their cooperative networks. Some bring aggressive intentions or destructive behaviors that threaten the entire system they've created. The responses our ancestors developed to these challenges demonstrate military and security thinking that represents a quantum leap in strategic capability. They create early warning systems that can detect potentially hostile approaches from great distances, while distinguishing between genuine threats and harmless travelers. They establish rapid response protocols that can mobilize defensive resources quickly, while avoiding unnecessary confrontations with groups that might be negotiated with rather than fought. The defensive strategies they implement combine individual combat capabilities with coordinated group tactics in ways that multiply their effectiveness against larger or better armed opponents. They understand how to use terrain advantages, superior knowledge of local conditions, and coordinated timing to overcome apparent disadvantages in numbers or equipment. But their most sophisticated defense is diplomatic rather than military. They create alliance networks with friendly groups that provide mutual security guarantees and shared intelligence about potential threats. They understand that their individual capabilities, however advanced, cannot match the resources that can be assembled through cooperative defense arrangements. The alliance structures they negotiate demonstrate political sophistication that challenges our understanding of early human social development. They create agreements that balance mutual obligations with individual autonomy. They establish communication systems that enable rapid coordination of defensive responses across multiple allied groups. They develop reputation mechanisms that encourage compliance with alliance obligations while punishing betrayal or non-cooperation. As their regional influence continues to expand, they encounter entirely new categories of challenges that test their adaptive capabilities in unexpected directions. The environmental modifications they've implemented to support their base camp and resource-sharing networks begin creating ecological changes that ripple through the broader landscape. Their success is altering the natural systems they depend upon in ways that require constant monitoring and adjustment. The ecological management techniques they develop reveal understanding of environmental relationships that wouldn't be formally recognized by science for millions of years. They understand how their activities affect soil chemistry, water flow patterns, and animal behavior across much larger areas than their immediate territory. They're practicing environmental engineering on a regional scale, using nothing but observation, experimentation, and accumulated wisdom. The wildlife management programs they implement demonstrate remarkable sophistication in understanding animal behavior and ecological relationships. They create hunting protocols that maintain sustainable population levels of prey species while preventing overexploitation. They establish territories and seasonal restrictions that allow wildlife populations to recover and reproduce, while still providing necessary resources for human consumption. Their plant management activities represent early forms of forestry and agriculture that enhance natural productivity while maintaining ecological balance. They understand which plants can be harvested sustainably and which require protection to maintain their long-term viability. They implement seed dispersal and soil improvement techniques that increase the natural productivity of their territory. But the most remarkable aspect of their environmental management is how they integrate these activities with their social and economic systems. They create incentive structures that encourage all participating groups to contribute to environmental stewardship while sharing in the benefits of increased productivity. They're practicing sustainable development principles that balance immediate needs with long-term ecological health. The seasonal planning they undertake reveals temporal thinking capabilities that extend far beyond immediate survival concerns. They're developing multi-year strategies that account for climate variations, resource cycles, and demographic changes that will affect their regional management systems. They understand how to prepare for challenges that may not emerge for months or years, while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to unexpected changes. The information processing systems they create to support these complex planning activities represent early forms of human record keeping and data management. They develop methods for storing and retrieving information about resource locations, seasonal patterns, group relationships, and environmental conditions. They're creating knowledge management systems that enable planning and decision-making based on accumulated data, rather than just immediate observations. The cultural developments that emerge during this period of regional management demonstrate the origins of human institutions that would persist for millennia. They create ceremonial practices that reinforce alliance relationships and shared commitments. They develop artistic traditions that encode important information about territorial boundaries, resource rights, and social obligations. They establish educational systems that ensure crucial knowledge is transmitted accurately across generations. The technological innovations that continue during this period reveal how abundance and security enable continued advancement in human capabilities. They develop manufacturing techniques that produce higher quality tools and equipment. They create transportation methods that enable more efficient movement of resources and people across their expanding territory. They implement communication systems that allow coordination of activities across distances that would have been impossible during their earlier independent operations. The specialization that becomes possible during this period of abundance creates entirely new categories of human roles and expertise. Some individuals focus on technological development and manufacturing. Others specialize in environmental monitoring and resource management. Still others concentrate on social coordination and diplomatic activities. They're creating the occupational diversity that will characterize advanced human societies. But perhaps most significantly, they begin engaging in activities that have no immediate survival function, but contribute to cultural development and intellectual advancement. They create art for aesthetic, rather than purely functional purposes. They engage in musical activities that serve social and emotional needs. They tell stories that preserve historical information and explore abstract concepts. These cultural activities represent the emergence of human behaviors that distinguish our species from all others. They're not just surviving in their environment anymore. They're creating meaning, beauty, and intellectual satisfaction that enhance the quality of existence beyond mere biological survival. They're becoming fully human in ways that will define our species throughout its future development. The knowledge systems they develop during this period represent early forms of human science, philosophy, and intellectual tradition. They create systematic approaches to understanding natural phenomena that go far beyond immediate practical applications. They develop theoretical frameworks that allow them to make predictions and test hypotheses about environmental and social relationships. The experimental activities they undertake reveal cognitive capabilities that challenge our understanding of early human intellectual development. They conduct controlled observations of natural processes to understand cause and effect relationships. They test different approaches to solving problems and evaluate the results systematically. They're practicing scientific methodology without formal institutional support or educational systems. Tonight, we've witnessed something extraordinary. These remarkable beings, our earliest ancestors, didn't just endure one of Earth's harshest environments. They transformed it through pure intelligence, cooperation, and an understanding of nature so profound, it borders on the mystical. From building ingenious shelters that would impress modern engineers, to creating the first human alliances that laid the foundation for all civilization, they proved that survival isn't about fighting nature's fury, but about becoming one with it. The next time you flip a light switch, adjust your thermostat, or simply walk through a door, remember that every comfort you enjoy traces back to these incredible innovators, working with nothing but plant fibers, stones, and brilliant minds. They didn't just survive the impossible, they made it look effortless. Human ingenuity has always found a way. Effortless. Human ingenuity has always found a way.